I want to say a good evening to everyone who's joined us. I do see a lot of familiar faces in here, but for those who don't know me, my name is Aidan. I'm the partnerships manager here at Imprimo, and typically the person you speak to via email if you use our platform and something has gone wrong for you. Before I get started, I want to thank you all once again for joining us today for our virtual event, Copyright Management Made Easy. So during today's event, in addition to learning a little bit more about what Imprimo is and how it can help your artistic career, if you don't already know, you'll also hear from David Newhoff and Stephen Tepp, who've been kind enough to join me this evening. They're the founders of RightsClick. David and Stephen will take us through a demonstration of the RightsClick rights management software suite, and we'll discuss some best practices for managing your copyright and touch on some contemporary issues surrounding rights management in the art world. Now, we like to position Imprimo as being LinkedIn for the visual art community. It's a digital platform that allows artists to document their work, share the story of their work in an engaging way, and minimize their business administration. Although Imprimo's blockchain-powered attribution ledger, which I will touch on later in greater detail, is often powerful enough to stop misuse before it starts, and often persuasive enough to put a stop to uninformed misuse, it's not determinative in a court of law, nor is it guaranteed to stop malicious misuse on its own accord. When combined with traditional legal recourse, however, the verified metadata provided by Imprimo can certainly enhance the efficacy of a takedown order. For these reasons and more, Imprimo and RightsClick have decided to partner to help artists streamline the process of protecting their rights to their work. During our respective demos, we'll explain the functions of our products and hopefully highlight how they can complement one another to bring more value to creators. So before I go any further, I'd like to introduce David Newhoff and Stephen Tepp, the founders of RightsClick, who've been patiently waiting here throughout my preamble. Gentlemen, if you'd like to each take 5 minutes to introduce yourself. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I guess I unmuted first, so I'll go first. Thank you all for joining us. It's a pleasure to meet you virtually. My name is David Newhoff. I am not a copyright attorney. I come to copyright advocacy from the creative side, predominantly in film and video production for over 20 years. And about 10 years ago, I got involved working with an organization in Washington, D.C. called Copyright Alliance, which is one of the major advocacy organizations on copyright policy in the United States, covering all forms of creators. Some of the advocacy groups specifically address one type of creator like music or photography. Copyright Alliance covers the universe. I began working with them and through that relationship became very passionate on the issues. I read a blog called The Illusion of More, which is followed by creators and the legal community, advocating various issues, all endorsing artist rights all the time. In 2020, I published a book on the subject of American copyright law, though it has some applicability internationally. And then along the way, in all that time, of course, I made a number of friends and colleagues in the copyright universe. One of them was Stephen Tepp. And over the years, we've had many conversations, worked on a few projects together. And one thing we definitely had in common was that we are both passionate about doing something for independent creators. Independent creators do not take enough advantage of protecting their rights. And out of those conversations, we developed the software suite we call RightsClick. We'll get to that as part of this discussion, but I've said enough about me. I'll let Stephen introduce himself.
Thanks, David. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Aidan, and thanks, Imprimo, for jointly holding this webinar with us. It's our pleasure to be here. My name is Stephen Tepp. I am a copyright lawyer. I've been practicing copyright law for about 25 years. David and I are both based in the United States, and RightsClick is aimed at compliance with some of those sticky formalities that the US still manages to have in its system, as well as enforcement in the US. So we'll talk about that in more detail. My background is I started in government. I worked for the US Congress and then for the US Copyright Office for a combined almost 15 years. From that vantage point, I saw exactly from the inside exactly how the US copyright system is overly burdensome and failing independent creators. And so when David and I started talking about, and David brought to me his ideas about how we could do something to help independent creators, I was all in. Since leaving government about, 13 years ago, I was Chief Intellectual Property Counsel at the US Chamber of Commerce, and I've also had my own company, Sentinel Worldwide, but now the majority of my time goes to RightsClick. During my time at the Copyright Office, I had the opportunity to work on a great variety of things: copyright legislation, litigation matters, and international matters. I was represented the United States Copyright Office in negotiations with countries all over the world. I've spoken all over the world on copyright, including in Toronto and Ottawa, which was particularly fun. And most relevant to our discussion tonight was I was involved in some of the executive functions of the Copyright Office regarding the registration system and regulations around that system. And we'll talk about how we're trying to make that much more accessible and the importance of complying with that if you're ever going to try and enforce your rights in the United States. Thanks for being here tonight.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, David. Thank you, Stephen. The short version of that is you have quite an extraordinary brain trust for all matters of rights management and copyright information here speaking to you this evening. If you do have any questions throughout our demos, discussions, whatever, feel free to pop them in the chat. Can't promise you we'll address them immediately, but we will hold a question and answer period at the end of this, and we'll try to get to every single one of you. I'm going to let you gentlemen, whoever prefers to run the demo, kick this off by showing us all exactly how RightsClick works and how artists can leverage it in their favor.
Thanks, Aiden. I'm going to start with a little bit of background about RightsClick and sort of the landscape in US law. So if you'll permit me, I'm going to share my screen here and get this running. There we go. So for decades, independent creators have specifically been given copyright tools that were designed to suit other people's needs. And RightsClick is designed for independent creators. We want to make your copyrights work for you by making it faster, simple, and affordable. It's your work, and they're your rights. So let me be very clear up front. Key point. We do not take your rights. We don't take a percentage of your royalties. We want you to keep those and get back to the creative work you love. We know that many independent creators don't engage with the copyright system because the law is complicated and confusing. It takes too much time to get everything organized, to follow all the rules, to be registered. In the case of non-US creators, especially when you're talking about registering in a foreign jurisdiction. And even if you do, it's often expensive to sue someone, and so it often isn't worth the effort. We get it, but 65% of graphic artists and designers, for example, report they've experienced piracy, which means if you're not enforcing your rights, you're leaving money on the table. We designed RightsClick so that you can take control of the situation, take control of your rights without disrupting your real work. Enforcing your rights should be part of your business, but not the main part. And I'll talk about this more in a minute. Enforcing your rights does not always mean a lengthy and expensive lawsuit. Sometimes you can get paid just by sending a letter. For example, what if you could confront infringers, say 10 of them, in less than an hour? Even if only 2 of them respond, and they each give you $500 to compensate you for the unauthorized use, you just made $1,000 for an hour's worth of time. No attorney's fees, no long court case, And let me say again, RightsClick does not take a percentage of your royalties. It's your work, you earned it, you keep it. Okay, so that all sounds nice, but how does it work? RightsClick is built around a three-part approach to copyright. First, get organized. Second, register your work. And third, take action against infringements. Here's how RightsClick makes doing that so much easier. First, getting organized. You can't take control if you don't know what you have and where to find it. So the first step in using RightsClick is to upload your work to our system. When you do that, you'll be prompted with straightforward questions about the work, who's the author, when was it created, and so on. Ideally, this will become part of your regular production process. Of course, you can also upload back catalog, and soon you'll have a useful database of your most important works. Second, register with the US Copyright Office. This is the linchpin, the key to opening the door of the full strength of American copyright law, the same tools that all the big movie studios, record labels, and book publishers use. To give you an idea of how important this is, just a few years ago, a case went all the way to the United States Supreme Court. A fabric design company called Unicolors took their case to the Supreme Court on just one issue, the validity of their copyright registration. Because without that, American authors can't even sue, and there are key enforcement benefits that are not available even to foreign authors. So we understand it's easy to say, go register. Big media companies have entire law firms dedicated to helping them do this, while most independent creators have a laptop and maybe some time in the evening. That's exactly why we built RightsClick, to make it fast and easy to submit your works for registration in just a few minutes. So why does it matter if you're not going to sue? Because many times sending a cease and desist letter is essentially a bluff. You don't want to go to court. They don't want to go to court. Having your work registered is like an ace face up in stud poker. It makes the other side nervous. It's like lots of things in life. Studying for a test or training for a marathon. If you prepare properly, you'll be in a stronger position and you'll look and feel more confident, and that will come through. Someone who receives a cease and desist letter from you is much more likely to respond to it because you're presenting a stronger hand. Once you're organized and your work is registered, you're prepared to deal with an infringement. We hear it all the time. I found an unauthorized use of my work. I'm really mad about it, but what do I do? There's lots of tools out there for identifying uses of your images. That's not what RightsClick does. But once you've found those images, those unauthorized uses, RightsClick helps answer the question, now what? Our assessment tool will step you through a series of straightforward questions about the unauthorized use. And in just a couple of minutes, you'll have a detailed report of the legally relevant facts so you can assess the strength of your claim. Then if you want to take action, our cease and desist tool will automatically enter your specific information into a professionally written template, or send a DMCA notice to get the work removed from an online platform. Or maybe you think this is one instance where you do want to go to court. We have a list of copyright attorneys across the United States, and you can send them the assessment report and get them right to work and save money on a first consultation. When copyright is so complicated and time-consuming that you ignore it, the infringers are in control. Our goal is to put you back in control of your rights. Then instead of getting mad, you get paid, and that's definitely better. Now I'm going to turn it over to David, who's going to show you a demonstration of the RightsClick software and exactly how it can help you take control of your work and your rights. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Yes.
Stop sharing.
I'll share my screen. Let's do that. All righty. Thank you. So to put some meat on the bones, as it were, about, in terms of how the app actually does what Steve was just talking about, RightsClick is first and foremost, as we said, get organized, a portfolio management system. And in particular, if you create many works, it's more useful for you. The high volume creator, like photographer, visual artist, you create lots of works in your lifetime, whereas, say a writer might create 4 or 5. A visual artist tends to create many more. So we designed it with that in mind, and everything is organized. You have a portfolio, and everything is organized into projects. Projects contain titles. So for example, here's a project with a bunch of not real illustrations that I threw together very quickly for demo purposes. These are not, clearly, as you can see, they're not very creative. And there are 33 titles in this project. And you can look at these. They can be organized in 10, 25, or 50 at a time. And for organizational purposes, all of the columns here are sortable, and those become useful the bigger these projects become. Projects can be organized according to your own logic and or the way you want to register works, but that we can get into that in Q&A. Suffice to say that most of the process of registering a work, once you've brought these into the system, which you upload from your computer, just like you would upload any number of other files, you can actually update the data to all of them at once, which may or may not apply. For example, if you created a series of works that are roughly all completed at about the same time, they don't have to be the same date exactly, but let's say the last date of a body of work you created, let's say over a 3-month period. You simply tell the system what they all are. They're not all, none of them are registered. Let's say none of them are published. In your case, you would not be a US citizen. You are the sole author, and you give it a creation date. Let's say you finished it early this month. I've now just updated all 33 of these images with most of the information that is needed for registration with the US Copyright Office. At that point, all I have to do is go over to the project. Go to my register, go to the same project, select all of them, register them, and moving Zoom around. And the rest of these screens are very straightforward, English language, no legalese, no scary text. Actually, in this case, you're not your citizen. I'll choose Canada. These questions are usually no. People don't typically work anonymously or pseudonymously, but you can certainly enter that information. Limit of claim means that if there's any existing work, say maybe some of you work in collage and you might incorporate something you didn't create in that collage, and you would disclaim that material as something you didn't create, and then you would add material you did create as an example of what that typically is. And then the last screen is really just to address questions. Are you the person to contact for rights, or do you have an agent or somebody that you prefer? And likewise, where do we mail the certificate? Meaning the Copyright Office, not us. Where does the Copyright Office mail the certificate? Is it to you? If not, and if by default anything you say yes to, that information is already in your profile. When you first create an account in RightsClick, like many things, you update your account settings with your address and phone number. So all that's in there, and you don't have to fill it in more than once. That way, when you say yes, mail it to me, it already has your address, etc. built in. At that point, you are done. Except that I didn't answer the question. Then you're done. That's it. You get a summary, and you sign, hit pay and submit, and it goes through us to the Copyright Office. We take care of the rest. Additionally, as we said, this is a database system. When you come back, once you submit that, you get an update from RightsClick that we've received it. Then once it's processed with the Copyright Office, you get another update that it's been submitted to the Copyright Office. That update comes in the form of both email and within the system. And then you would see, if you came back to this project and looked at any of the titles, you would see that it's automatically updated to in progress. The application date and the case number would be entered for you. Subsequently, then we follow up, and when the registration is complete, that switches to yes, and the registration number goes in. This application date is very key from a legal standpoint. If you happen to have an infringement, we can answer questions about that as well. The next part of the way RightsClick is designed, as Stephen mentioned, is taking action. If you could take action yourself on what we call sort of garden variety infringements. What's a garden variety infringement? It would be somebody who's accessible, probably not somebody in China per se, that's hard, but somebody who's accessible under the law, usually a commercial infringer. Most artists that I talk to are not all that worried about every single little misuse or, by some kid on the internet. That can get annoying, but the biggest ones usually that are most annoying are some commercial user who should have paid for it, and they also have the money to pay for it. So those are the ones people tend to want to go after. And we said, how do we make that fast? So that if you find something, so here's an example of a not real diner in West Orange, New Jersey, that has used my photograph of the Black Mariah, which is the first movie studio in the United States. And so I found this infringement on this website, and I'm not happy about it. So I would go and find the image within RightsClick, and you'll notice that this one is registered. I've actually given it a fake registration number, but here it is registered. And what I would do at this point is click assess, and I would start the assessment process. In this case, rather than have you watch me fill out forms, I'm going to go straight to, I'll step through it, one that's already been created, forgive me. There we go. I'm going to move the Zoom stuff out of my way. This is what the assessment process looks like. We wanted to make it easy to understand the kind of information that's necessary to potentially proceed with a claim of infringement and remedy that infringement without you having to become legal experts. These are questions in plain English. It's a series of radio buttons and drop downs and simple, obvious fields. That's the word I was looking for. So this is your own description of what happened in just a few words. You collect the information about the alleged infringer. Same thing here, we collect evidence. So for example, in this case, a URL, because it's a website that I'm concerned about. Here's a basic fair use, and by fair use under US law, fair use. Fair dealing in Canada is a little different. And finally, one more page about exceptions, again, under US law. This is RightsClick is about enforcing in the United States. And then when you're done, you have a summary that's useful in a few different ways. Number one, it gives you as a non-attorney some basic information about the nature of the infringement based on the facts that you've presented to RightsClick. It's organized that information. So for example, here's everything you need to know about the work. Here's everything that's needed to know about the infringer. Depending on your answers to some of the questions, you may get some guidance in here to consider. And then finally, what can you do with this? Well, if you actually already know you want to go to an attorney, you could take this summary, save it, it's already saved automatically, and you can actually find an attorney in our list, for example, make contact with them through RightsClick, and then if they agree to hear from you, you can send them this summary, and that will get you off to a conversation about your potential, your claim before they even pick up the phone. They already know most of what they need to know to make the next move. Prior to that, as we mentioned in the slide deck, you can take action yourself and maybe try to get some money or get this remedied without going to court, without spending money on an attorney, by sending an email, a cease and desist notice. We have 3 different stages. You can stop the use, you can stop the use and demand money, you can actually authorize the continued use for money. In any of these cases, it's all fill-in material, and the data from that assessment will fill in the rest of the information. So for example, you could say I want $500. I'll let you use it for a year. I would like to hear back in 6 days. You preview that email, make sure it says what you want. It's brought in the information about the use and the work. You save it. Now you've got a paper trail and you email it. Pardon me. Right from within RightsClick. You have this paper trail you can follow up on. Additionally, this will appear here. Is this the right one? Yes. This will appear here in your dashboard. And usually what I do is just add a note about which one it is because it appears generically. Karen's. And you can add other notes if you want, but now you know what day you wanted to follow up. And if you don't hear back, you can reopen that, go right back to the cease and desist section, pardon me, and hit follow up. And you can actually send a follow up right from within RightsClick and also keep track of that. Naturally, if you were to send out 4 or 5 of these in a 3-month period and you're otherwise busy making art, you're going to forget what you sent. So that's why we built in this docketing system so that you can keep track of what you've done. And it also can appear in calendar form, and you can create events in the calendar for the same purpose. That's the overview of what RightsClick does.